All right, welcome everyone. My name is Nina Walker. I'm the president of the North Carolina Athletic Trainers Association. And I just wanted to welcome you to our Can We Talk series, which is hosted by our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee. Our chairs, Kelly Daniels and Janae Fletcher, are both here. But today we're going to have a conversation about Native and Indigenous experiences in healthcare and sports. We have two wonderful speakers that have been gracious enough to help us out. We have Alyssa Fredericks and Amy Brunell. Alyssa is part of the Hopi tribe, and she is with us from Arizona. She'll be off screen for just a little bit as she gets home safely from her job. And then we have Amy Brunell, who is here from our men's lacrosse U21 World Games. She was the athletic trainer for the Hosadoni tribe. And I'm just going to let Amy talk a little bit about who she is, where she's from, all of that good stuff. And then we'll have Alyssa introduce herself, and then I will do a little talk.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you, North Carolina ATA, for this opportunity. So my name is Amy Brunell, and I'm actually a athletic trainer with the Colony High School in Albany, New York. That's upstate New York. I'm not Indigenous. I'm actually I'm white Caucasian and was asked to join the Haudenosaunee Nationals U21 team this past May, just a few months before heading off to Ireland. So I've lived in upstate New York most of my time, and then in one of the slides that Nina has will show the land area for the Haudenosaunee. So I got involved with the team just because of my love of lacrosse. My name got put out there as a possibility of being able to travel with the team because of lacrosse connections and athletic training connections. For those of you that are a little bit younger and don't think that those personal connections much of anything, they mean a lot. And that's how I ended up with recently named. It's not as out there in the social medias, but I'm team that goes to San Diego for the World Championship this coming summer. So I'm excited about continuing to work with the team as they make the movement towards being in the LA Olympics in 2028. It'll be a sixes tournament versus full field. And I think Nina has some information about lacrosse a little bit later here to explain for those that haven't had a lot of experience with lacrosse. But North Carolina, I'm sure you guys have been introduced to it. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Alyssa, are you able to speak safely yet?
Yeah, I can, if you guys can still hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, sure. So my name is Elisa Frederick. So Escalade, that means thank you, my language, for inviting me to be a part of this topic. I was born and raised on the Hopi Reservation, which is in Northeast Arizona. I currently live in just outside of Durango, Colorado, and I work at a middle school, high school, little town called Bayfield. So there is a smaller population of Native Indigenous students that I serve, but that's kind of, I tend to take them under my wing as my time. And I've basically went to school and worked around this area for over 10 years. So I'm very comfortable with the athletes around this area. And I am a big fan of lacrosse. So.
Thank you. And thank you so much. I know with time changes and everything, this was a big ask. So I appreciate it. Lisa's also one of our leaders in DEI for, is it Division 7 or District 7, sorry. And so it was really great to be able to, get some of her talent for our conversation here. But I think the big thing that we want to talk about is, why is this important for us in the state of North Carolina and around the country? And one of the big things is, I think, as athletic trainers, but obviously members of our community, is just recognizing where communities reside. And so I love this map because in North Carolina, we are, blessed enough to have a lot of very active tribal communities all over our state. And so Orange County is where the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill is. And, it's just really cool to be able to see, who has been part of that land way before, we have gotten there, but also recognize that members of that tribal community live there and are really strong, in their community, in our community. And so for those of us that are from North Carolina on this call, just taking a look at, where all of these communities reside, and then where you reside, in terms of yours. I recognize that this is really a cool space because we have people from all over the country, which I really appreciate you all taking time. And so I just wanted to share some of the tribal groups that are residing in your area. And so this map is really helpful because it color coordinates. Now, these aren't lands that may necessarily be restricted or, like definitely placed for that group, but it's where the most amount of individuals are living all across the country. And as you can tell, there's so many different tribes and tribal communities that are all over the country. And so as athletic trainers, I think it's important that we're aware of all different communities, not just the ones that we may interact with daily or ones that we even know, exist in our communities. I had a great little short story, but I was working with one of our football players at UNC, and I had to do some, abdominal pelvic work. So I usually like to, make the patient feel a little bit more comfortable. So I ask questions. The guys always have tons of tattoos and everything. And so as we were talking, one of my favorite questions is, what is something, like what's your favorite food, or what's something fun that your family does? And he said, well, I've got this, really great mix. My, mom's Jamaican and my dad's Cherokee. And I was like, oh my gosh, what a wonderful, amazing combination. I'm like, whose food dominates? Like, what do you get to eat? And he said, obviously, the Jamaican food won. And so he's very connected to that. But he did express that, he really missed having a connection to his Cherokee, tribal community. And it was a player that I never would have imagined, would eat, because he does not like visually present, but also that he was so embedded. He loved going to powwows. He loved, being with his elders. He loved all of these things, and he was kind of taken away from that. And so he kind of got adopted into the Lumbee tribe, which is a little bit closer to us in Chapel Hill. And I just thought that was really interesting. Like, you never know who you're, communicating with and what kind of exciting things they can have. And so that's why we really wanted to do this, is because we felt that this was important, and that we as athletic trainers need to be mindful of, a lot of different communities, including our neighbors. And so with that, did we lose Alyssa? Just checking.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I see her. I just wanted to briefly, Alyssa, if you are able to speak, just talk a little bit about language. And I know that's a big thing for us in terms of like, what is appropriate, titles, what should we be calling individuals? And if you could give us a little bit of insight into that, if you're available.
It's Amy. Can I jump in here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So on this map, I'd just like to point out, you don't see Haudenosaunee, and that's because you see the word Iroquois instead.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was that's a slang term for the snake brought over by the settlers. I think it's French origin. And what's been happening in the last about 5 to 10 years, the Haudenosaunee have been trying to reclaim their name. The Haudenosaunee is what they call themselves, means people of the Longhouse. So that upstate New York region you see, and it's probably similar to every border we have here, but we have 6 nations of the Haudenosaunee, and they've been getting away from the term Iroquois because of the slang name of it, and the words matter, just like Tewaaraton, the lacrosse word, that's like English pronunciation of those letters, when in Haudenosaunee it's actually pronounced Dewaladan, so it sounds completely different than Tewaaraton. There's no T sound in this language. So hopefully these maps will be updated from Iroquois to Haudenosaunee, and see that difference coming through more and more with the Haudenosaunee Nationals lacrosse team and their region.
No, that's awesome. And thank you very much for sharing that. And I think it is interesting because in lacrosse, for national teams, the women have always been the Haudenosaunee team. But the men had always gone by Iroquois. And then this year was, I think, one of the first years that they finally reclaimed it. And one of the interesting things about, you know, a name is that when they have passports and their passports say Haudenosaunee, and when people would show their passport, they didn't know what that meant because they went by Iroquois and they said, why doesn't your passport say Iroquois? You know, because obviously they're traveling through more Anglo areas. And some countries don't even recognize it. I think Ireland is one of the few countries, which is why it was amazing that we were able to have them out there, because a lot of countries don't recognize these tribal nations as sovereign. And so they need US passports when they don't live necessarily on US land. Sorry, Amy, you had something to say?
Yeah, so the difference between the women being Haudenosaunee and the men Iroquois is when they started the team. The Iroquois men started in, I think, the 1950s or 60s. That's when they originated. The women didn't start playing on the national stage until much, much later. It's not considered a women's sport in the Haudenosaunee. So for women to play it, there's some elders in the community that don't like that women and girls are playing lacrosse. That's not their sport. It's supposed to be a medicine game for the men. So that was part of the probably the differences between what, you know, the women starting so much later in the organized sport is why they started with Haudenosaunee versus the men trying to make the change from Iroquois. So
nice. You got all the info. Thanks, Amy.
2 weeks first with the team, and I just had a wonderful time. Wonderful time.
Alyssa, are you with us yet?
Yeah, I was just gonna segue into what Amy said. A lot of information is when you talk to us is if you ask a question, you know, we have a lot of information and knowledge that we're open to sharing. The big thing, like she mentioned, is that a lot of Native communities are taking some of the Anglo names that have been used for their tribes. You're going back to more traditional names that they've used for themselves. So, you know, in my area, with my tribe, we had a lot of the Spanish conquistadors around our area. So they used to call us by different, you know, different names in Spanish terms, which were sometimes derogatory. However, you know, some tribes are a little bit luckier than others that were able to, you know, keep their traditional name when the federal government started to, you know, recognize certain tribes and move them onto reservations. So there's a big, long history that's involved with every single different tribe.
I noticed a lot of the athletes that live on either Six Nations or one of the reservations are using their clan names. And I know this isn't speaking for every nation, but in the Haudenosaunee, the clan mothers name babies when they're born, and they might also have an Anglo name, but a lot of our athletes are now starting to use or have been using their clan name. So it's a spelling I'll see, and then I get the pronunciation. I have a little bit of a speech problem too sometimes. You know, and I just ask over and over, how do you pronounce this name? I mean, what name do you choose to use? And I'm going to use that name. I'm not going to ask them to shorten it or a nickname to make me more comfortable. I'm going to use the name that they choose and they prefer. So it's really been a great time. I grew up in upstate New York, and I've lived in the Haudenosaunee area for a majority of my life. So I was around. I did my master's thesis actually on the residential schools. So I was speaking with Seneca elders about their experiences at the time, and this is 20 years ago. And we know so much more about the residential school system now in terms of the public knowledge. Of course, the indigenous nations have known about the residential schools for 100 years, but now there's more public knowledge about that. And I've been calling the Haudenosaunee that ever since I spoke to the elders. So.
No, that's wonderful. So, Alyssa, I know, I guess back to my original question, we had discussed, you know, what the best, you know, terms to use, Indigenous, Native American, Native, tribal names. Like, what do you suggest we do as we're interacting with different members of different nations and tribes in terms of using titles? Oh, there you go.
Was that a question for me? I'm sorry.
Yes, yes.
So obviously I just got home. It's snowing
Yes,
like crazy.
little cutie.
Um, so I think the best way to really just approach that is to just ask the individual themselves and say, what do you prefer to be identified by? Like, do you prefer to be called Native American, indigenous? A lot of the language is changing away from American Indian or Indian in general, just because of the huge um, backwards history with the whole Columbus thing. There's a big action amongst many Native communities. It's like I was like, I'm not Indian because we're not India. We're our own people. We have our own culture, languages, and then kind of what Amy said too is like there's a lot of, or you mentioned yourself, there's a lot of individuals that don't look Native, but they my husband is blue eyes, brown hair, light skinned, and then my children have a little bit lighter brown eyes. So best way is just ask the person, see what they're comfortable with. I think that's the best way to address the situation.
Yeah, I think that's great. And then we have a slide, and this was just a general informational slide. But I think a lot of times when language is created and things just become part of our culture and our vernacular, we don't even know the history behind them, or that they may be harmful or they may be disrespectful in a way. And I think you did a perfect job of saying, why we don't use the word Indian, but there's some others, and I don't know if any of these kind of jump out at you as either microaggressions or things that we shouldn't use. I'm sure most of you guys can just like read through some of them, but Alyssa, is there anything specific that kind of you want to really highlight for us as a group?
Well, it's like if you're calling someone a savage, that's a really strong word to name of anyone in general, because I think it's meant more as a derogatory thing. I think some of the on the male side, they've been approaching, been called chief, or something like that. Squaw, obviously very outdated,
Mhm.
again, a derogatory term. So like there was a peak in Phoenix, Arizona, that was called Squaw Peak. Um, and of course, that being a very outdated word, they ended up changing the name of that mountain to Payastewa Peak, which was actually a Hopi soldier that died during the war. So um, again, there's just, if you kind of think it might be a bad idea, I probably don't recommend using it. Um, we just got through Halloween, so every year we see individuals dressed as an Indian princess, someone in a headdress. If you watch NFL games, there's always the war chant, the tomahawk chop. Those are just kind of like, we tend to, I think we almost got a little desensitized to it, where we just kind of roll our eyes and just kind of shake our head. More likely than not, we're just gonna be like, you look stupid, you sound stupid, and we're just gonna kind of move on.
No, thank you for that. And I don't know if Amy or Kelly, you have any comments about some of these phrases to avoid, or just things for us to look out for as well.
I don't, there's much more. I do happen to have noticed, especially in New York, I don't know in other parts of the country, where high schools have been moving away from the Indian mascot, where we had Indian on horseback. My own school, when I first arrived, had Indian had a horseback holding a spear and a full headdress. And I'm like, it's not even historically correct.
Accurate.
Never mind, you know? So they dropped it soon after, and I would like to think is because I had some pressures there. But when I first walked in, I said we can't have this, and they said they were already in the midst of changing it. So we still have Raiders as our who we are, but we don't have that Indian on horseback. We just have our Colony C. So we don't have a mascot anymore. We're still known as the Colony Raiders. So,
Mhm.
and I know that happened at several other schools across New York. and hopefully we're seeing that more. There's always pushback, but I think we have to look at the appropriate nature and even a historical accuracy on a lot of these mascot time things. Why are we trying to cartoon the Cleveland Indians into, when they had that cartoon type
His
mascot.
name was Chief Wahoo.
Yeah, Chief Wahoo. Yeah. So, why are we doing this? And people like, well, we're trying to honor them. I'm like, that's not honor. That's not the way you honor a group. That's not how you honor a person. So,
Well, I would say even for Native ladies is that Pocahontas. I'm like, oh, because of the movie from Disney, it's been a romanticized story about Pocahontas, and that's not even her real name. That's she has her own indigenous name. And then myself, like my email that's shown on the flyer, that's actually my Hopi name that was given to me after I finished my coming of age ceremony. So I do have a cultural name, and then I have my English name. So that's just part of some of the culture things that I still practice. Same for my children.
I was just gonna add, like looking at the slide, it just makes me think about all the ways that these languages come so just woven into like our like kind of typical like American society of like we say things we don't even think about it. I work with high school kids and I'll call them on it when they say things and they literally do not know where it came from. They had no idea that like a spirit animal was something that they were taking from some other culture and like making it into this like not like this like joke or whatever you want to call it, this like whole thing, or they like the phrase Eskimo kiss is something that like we just grew up with that we literally I did not know that for like the first couple decades of my life until I was like educated and also just sat down and thought about like, well, why is that a phrase that people say? Like, where does that come from? What does that even mean? Why is that a thing? I lived in Oklahoma for a couple of years and it made me think about this. I was looking at the word down there, like powwow, and I have like coaches will be like, well, let's have a powwow about it on Wednesday. I'm like, no, like that's not like now that I didn't know that for the first as like a white person from like suburban Raleigh. I was just a word. I had no idea where it came from. I did not understand. So I do think it's important for us to recognize it's not even intentional a lot of the time. It's just so like woven into just like our slang words. We don't even know where it's coming from. And then when we do know, we're like, oh yeah, I should not be doing that. So just something to think about. This is always a good reminder for me to think about the words that we use intentionally or not.
Well, I would say to that is that so my parents are boarding school kids. They were all sent to boarding schools when they were children. So I would say perhaps it was acceptable because it was part of the trying to, fit in, to blend in. If we go into the residential schools, boarding schools, I know I have personal, history from my grandparents, my parents. I think, and then you look at Western TV shows, Western movies. There's John Wayne. That again, that's just part of if you think of American West, you think John Wayne. You see the Monument Valley. You see, cowboys and Indians, and even like I was talking to my dad, I was like they wanted to be the cowboys because they would always win. You know what I mean? So again, a lot of it has been romanticized. I think for those on the East Coast, that's probably the closest exposure they had to the American West, and that's what they grew up with. So, not necessarily something that they knew, but it's something that still perpetuates until now.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And like I said, we wanted to make sure that language was a really important, just like first thing that we talked about. And so moving into just a little bit more about like Alyssa, I know you've got a little squirmy worm over there, so this might be a hard chat, but just talk to me a little bit about how you got involved in athletic training. And then I know I've read an article that you wrote, a blog for the NATA, just your journey about becoming an athletic trainer, healthcare, and then coming into returning close back to your community?
So I was very fortunate to have an athletic trainer when I was in high school. Again, I grew up, I'm raised on the reservation. We're pretty rural. The closest town that had like grocery stores and stoplights and gas stations and things like that was about an hour away. So we're like an hour and a half northeast of Flagstaff. So for whatever reason, he came to our school and started athletic training. And I happened to be a junior then, because I was a cross country runner, and I got hurt, and they offered a sports medicine class. So that kind of just started, that ticked some of the boxes for me. Like, hey, this is sports. Like, hey, it's medicine. I like doing both of these. It's cool. And then I went to Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado, which I basically live just outside now. They offered an athletic training program, and that was just a chance that I happened to stumble upon that school because I went for a ACES conference. And then we found out that they had a Native American tuition waiver, so Native American students could attend the school tuition free. So that was another big, nice win for me. So I completed the athletic training education program and decided that I wasn't ready to practice yet because it's kind of, big and scary, even after you get your bachelor's degree. I decided to go to A.T. Still University in Mesa, Arizona for my master's degree. And I met I have so many Hall of Fame mentors, not only from Arizona, but just from the NATA as well. And it was really hard and a struggle, but at the same time, I'm so glad I did it and that I actually finished. And my experience with both the athletic training programs is that I tended to either be the only one or, one of the very few Native students for a lot of things. And I actually see one of my associates here, Muriel. We met each other at a conference, and we recognized the need that there's some Native athletic trainers around, and we want to meet each other to support each other. And it's just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, I think I forgot to mention, but Alyssa is it co-chair of or co-founder of the Natives AT group. And so I think that's a really, cool environment for you. What do you feel like was the most supportive about getting that group together? And I guess what need did that kind of fill for you and the rest of the athletic trainers in that group?
So the group basically started with the pandemic. On most reservation schools, especially in the Four Corner area, a lot of schools were shut down. Everything went online. There were no sports being played. And of course, a lot of athletic trainers lost their jobs. There was no kids being active. And we just, we knew a couple of each other, and word of mouth spread. And we just met every week on Zoom just to, talk about what we were seeing, what we were feeling, all our anxiety with the pandemic, and what our hopes and dreams were. And it just kind of progressed to more and more projects. And it's just been a great situation because we're getting more and more calls to one, to do this to spread awareness about Native American issues, and then two is to cover more events like the Native American Basketball Invitational that we did in Phoenix this past summer. And then again, that gives us a way to meet people like Amy, which is really great. You see someone on Facebook, social media, and like, hey, there's someone that looks like me and does something similar or something that I'm interested in. So it's a lot of mentorship, networking, and just supporting each other. Like, what injuries are we seeing? What coaches are driving us crazy? What kids are driving us crazy?
Well, I am going to give you a break because you're doing outstanding. So if you want to go off camera for a little bit and bounce her around, because I want to make sure we're getting the healthcare part of it, but also the sports part. So we're going to just do a quick video and then talk to Amy a little bit about her journey and how she got involved. So I think our next slide sorry. One day I will be decent at this. Is this one. So if you guys want to watch this for a minute.
You might have to change your tab if you opened on YouTube. So you make sure that that's the one you're showing.
What was that? Do you not see it?
No, we don't see the YouTube video. We just see the link.
Okay, hold on. Stop share. Share screen. Like I said, one day. Now, do you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, we can't hear your sound though.
Are you kidding? How do you do that?
That's a great question.
Do you know how to change sound for
If
anyone?
Because you have earbuds in.
Can you
There
hear
you go.
that?
Yep. Yes.
Amy, can you hear that? Can you give me a thumbs up or no?
Okay.
Do you have earbuds in? Take those out.
Nope. Oh, here.
It's just the kind of feeling you get, and you wonder how that person does it. It's just, there was life up there that we believe up in the sky world, and
Just in case you're wondering, there's a share sound button on.
the game of lacrosse starts up with, before lacrosse was even put here with the people, it started out with the animals.
In front and through the legs. Ty Thompson with his first.
Before life was formed down here on Earth, there was life up there that we believe up in the sky world, and there was this game of lacrosse that was told to us that each individual animal brought different perspective and uniqueness to the game, such as the bear, is big and strong, could catch anything in the middle. If you look at an eagle, his eyesight overview of the field is something that beyond any other animal can do. So as you can see, it's fascinating to me to see the different uniqueness of players that bring a specialty to this game. It still lives on today because you have not one player that can do what that other player can do on the field. It's just the kind of feeling you get, and you wonder how that person does it. I think it's just that spirit of the game of lacrosse and those ancestors that had played the game before us, and we play that game as a ritual, as a medicine to heal ourselves or heal our people, our community, and nation. Lacrosse in our community, it's really an integration intertwined with our culture and our way of life. When a male is born in our culture, it's said right in the speeches of when that kid gets his traditional given name. My traditional given name is Gaya or Gaihit, which means the sun is leaning. And that's the name we're given to when we're born into this life. We're given this name in our traditional longhouse way of life. And it's said in a speech that when our chief gives us our name, it's said that maybe this male is going to become a speaker, or maybe he'll become a dancer. And in that message also, it said that maybe he's going to become a lacrosse player. Right from when we're born, they say that we're given this chance or this opportunity if we want it. In that process, that we're given a wooden traditional lacrosse stick in our cradle board. That traditional lacrosse stick is a resemblance of that stick that kid's going to use throughout his lifetime, and that he's going to continue to grow with, and that maybe he'll have that chance of creating his own stick and continuing on that traditional wood of stick that came from a life form, which is a tree. The essence of that whole thing is really giving our thanks and our appreciation to that for taking a life of that tree. We're going to continue on this traditional lacrosse stick in a way and use it as a medicine to maybe heal someone or go out there and have good intentions and to encourage and to prosper in that way individually and for the people around you.
Miles Thompson, the catch, and behind the back.
One of the things that I believe is that we're all spiritually, emotionally, physically connected to this life. and the things around us. And I think sometimes we forget that as human beings on this earth, that we're a small segment in this life, and that we have to continue to remind ourselves and be humbled and be thankful for our everyday crossings, our learnings, and people that cross our path in our lifetime, and to be appreciative and to be thankful for those things. I just feel lucky to be here, out there grinding, having fun, and just really being a fun spirit out there.
All right, you guys fired up, ready to play?
Great
So
spirit.
Amy, tell us a little bit about how you got involved with all the things that you're doing. And I think there's a congratulations in order too. So you can share all your great news with the group.
Mentioned earlier, it's about people in our athletic training community, but also the Haudenosaunee. And I became involved with the Haudenosaunee because of my connections in the athletic training community. I got a call one day right before Memorial Day saying, "Hey, do you know any athletic trainers over in Ireland?" Because they knew I had some connections in Ireland. That's another long story. I said, "Yeah, why?" And he's like, "Well, the Haudenosaunee are looking for a team to go, an athletic trainer to either be over in Ireland with them or go with them to Ireland." I'm like, "What are the dates?" And I was able to work it out with my high school. It butted right up to the beginning of preseason, so I did all the preseason tasks I needed to do before that got started. But I love lacrosse, and it's been a sport that I've known since I was at Stony Brook. I went to Stony Brook on Long Island, and then I've been in upstate New York most of my career. Like I said, I've seen a lot of high quality lacrosse, so the opportunity to work with these elite athletes was remarkable, just unbelievable. And these, the U21s essentially, but it went from anywhere from a couple high school kids to a handful of D1 players and everything in between. We have athletes that didn't go to college and they're working in the community. They play lacrosse and they play hockey and they do all sorts of other things. But the big thing with lacrosse that I found was, other than that, it's, I knew this, but it's one of the oldest games known. It's been around for over 1,000 years. That's really integral to the Native American culture, especially the Haudenosaunee. And as Jeremy Thompson, who's from Onondaga clan, and then actually the older gentleman you saw in, not the one that was making the sticks, but coaching, and he was real early in the video as well. He is Oren Lyon, and he's the faith keeper for the Onondaga clan. So he's been very involved, and as a faith keeper, he upholds the history and the traditions of actually the Turtle Clan of the Onondaga Nation. Let me get a little more specific with that. So they view it as a preparation, and it's a creator's game, and not only for, I think we've all heard, it's to prepare them for war, but that's not it. It's a social event. It was to get them together and bring the sport together, to use it as a medicine game. They really look at it as part of their identity, who they are. When the game was being played, it was, even over in Ireland with the team, they weren't worried about like what was said on the front. I think Jeremy Thompson actually said something like this: "We don't play for the name on the back of our shirt. We don't play for the name on the front of our shirt. We play for the creator." And they always have that grounding that goes with it. Even if they have a good game or if they lose, they look at it and said, "Did we do the best we can do?" And I know a lot of our athletics are like that as well, but this is truly something, an experience that I've never truly felt with other teams, where they play for something beyond themselves. So it was really quite an experience. Learning some of the cultural differences. I mean, most of these athletes have dealt with an athletic trainer, athletic therapist before, because there's some from Canada. Six Nations reservation is over in Ontario, Canada, and then there's the Mohawk Nation at Akwesasne, which actually borders New York State and Canada, in addition to the other five nations of Onondaga, Oneida, Cayuga, Tuscarora, and Seneca. And what I was learning through my experience with the Haudenosaunee is it's a men's game. And when they had their pregame ceremony, which was usually a tobacco offering, women weren't allowed. They weren't, so I had things to do anyway, but that's okay. They went into the woods behind our housing and they did their tobacco offering. The wooden sticks are made from hickory tree, and the wood is supposed to teach them about balance and strength, balance and flexibility in their training, and just good person characteristics, and not just for sport but for life. And the funny thing is we had a stick, a traditional stick, that was in the corner of what we call the matriarch's house. The coaches' wives also went to Ireland to kind of help as an assistant, to assist the team. So we had our own house, and there was a wood stick in the corner. And one of the coaches wanted it because he wanted to give it as a gift to somebody in Ireland. So it was right near me. So I go to reach for it, and they're like, no, you can't touch the wood stick, because as a female, I would take the medicine away from the stick. So it wasn't that I can't touch it because I'm not good enough. I couldn't touch it because I would take something away from that wood stick. So traditionally, they were trying to maintain that traditional standard of the wood stick and string it with natural and like furs and tendons and things like that. So I forget exactly where they get the stringing kit from, but it is natural materials. So the experience was, it was normal in the way of lots of times that what I did with the athletes, massage, pregame taping, taking care of their injuries when they did occur, going to the hospital, unfortunately, one time. But the other 20 hours of the day that I was doing other things was really just a fun experience, learning words. And a lot of what I learned was just through observation and listening. So I heard them say nyawa a lot, nyawa, nyawa. They would ask for something, and then when they received it, nyawa, I'm like, what does that mean? It was thank you. So I picked up a lot of words that I could use with them, and they really appreciated the fact that I was making the attempt to learn their language and understand what they were saying. So I don't want to make this sound like, this is, all end all kind of thing, but it was just my experience with the Haudenosaunee. Very, very normal in terms of athletics, but being immersed and being around the Haudenosaunee families for 2 weeks is really just a fun experience. And it was very eye-opening to some experiences. We had a lot of conversations about the residential schools. So if you haven't heard about the residential and boarding schools, they were telling me that there isn't a family, and I'm sure Alyssa can attest to this, there isn't a family alive that hasn't been affected by the residential and boarding schools. So it was good for me to learn more, since I've done my master's degree, my thesis 20 years on it, 20 years ago. But it's getting out there and wanting to learn more about the people in your community and what they've experienced and what their families have experienced. One thing I kind of chuckled about earlier is when you mentioned how a person might not look Native American. And the first time I met the team, I'm walking in the training camp, and I met the coach, and the coach's name is Mark. So I'm writing notes, trying to learn all these names, because I have 50 people I have to learn. I'm like, Mark, redhead, coach. And then I found out later he's Haudenosaunee. So I'm like, oh, okay. Not that I made a difference in how I spoke to him, but it also gave me a little more perspective on who he was and what he's been through. He was one of the first teams that the Iroquois Nationals at the time, now the Haudenosaunee Nationals, had back in the 80s. So, you get a better perspective of who people are when you know what they've been through. So he might have a little more privilege in terms of having white skin and red hair. But he has definitely lived on the reservation, and he's been involved with the Haudenosaunee culture for a very long time.
Amy, thank you for that. I also have such a deep, deep respect for the culture, because I was able to be on the reservation for a tournament. And I think it's one of those things that you don't really understand until you've been there. And just to feel the love and the community that happens around a sport like lacrosse. I just thought it was amazing. Literally everyone in that town was at that indoor, tournament. They were all there. The drums were going when the team's playing. It's just this energy that is undeniable. And it was really cool because Alfie, the guy that does the wooden sticks, he's actually quite famous now because he custom makes them. I was able to be there and watch him make one and just hear about just how much goes into it and how much thought. And when that stick is created for that person, the tree and touch the tree and what that tree's experienced all gets into this stick and is all part of the experience of that player. And so to have that such deep connection to nature and to what's going on, and like you said, they just play for something completely different than the average American lacrosse player. It's not about booze and what kind of socks I'm wearing and what kind of how many colors can I mismatch in one outfit. It's about something that's so deep and so so beautiful. And so I'm so glad that you were able to have that experience. I actually got to hang out with Amy in Ireland too. So it was a lot of fun. But yeah, now I think I want to be mindful of time. So it is 9 o'clock. And if you want to pop off, that's completely great. We're gonna stop the recording. But if you have any questions or anything,